What is that story from your school? Serious? First day of freshman. After the roll was called, one kid said his name was not called. What is your name? Hal Wirtz. For the next 4 years someone would take a test for Hal, get photographed as Hal, join clubs as Hal. No one in the admin noticed it was someone different in each photo. The only time no one stood up for him was at graduation. This happened 1972 to 1976. At a party someone while very drunk whipped out his dick and masturbated on someone else's car. It very quickly became the go-to retort whenever he tried giving someone else shit. You jizzed on a car. School trip to China. On the day of return, a 16-year-old girl from my grade stole a pair of sunglasses from the airport and got caught by airport security. She stayed behind while everyone went home. Her parents had to fly to China from halfway across the world to bail her out. Made the news. There was a kid who intentionally took a shit in the middle of the gym for $10 and for some reason everyone called him Parmesan after that. Student my freshman year of high school had a mental breakdown. The health teacher failed him. Rumor was he got beat at home for it, and so he took it out on the teacher. He started screaming in the middle of class. Teacher sent him to the hall, and when she opened the door to check on him he had constructed a homemade blowtorch with hairspray and a lighter to try and catch her in fire. When she opened the door all you see was flames. He was shortly expelled afterwards and the teacher took a few months off work. Don't know whatever happened to the kid. Our biology teacher was everyone's favorite teacher, and so one year everyone decided to prank him by leaving pennies everywhere he would go and no one would acknowledge it to make him think he was crazy. It started out with people leaving pennies here or there in his classroom, but as time went on it kept getting more and more extreme. Students started leaving cups of pennies on his desk, in his jackets. When he had speeches in the auditorium people printed pictures of pennies and snuck them into the papers he was reading from. And finally, they print large pictures of pennies and snuck them into his classroom and put them on his walls. Morning news show crew had their camera accidentally go live and broadcast to the entire school a student sucking a Pop-Tart in a suggestive manner and another flipping off the camera. Folks, if you're in front of a camera, always assume it is on. Back in the 90s, a kid came out to a few friends and as the old saying goes, those friends told a few of their friends, who told a few of their friends and so on. Within 2 weeks there was a petition to have him removed from the school and the other 3 high schools in town had petitions passed around to prevent him from transferring. Instead of doing something about it, most teachers and administrators signed the petition as well and looked away when he was being harassed. He had to walk around with a friend group everywhere so he wasn't jumped and couldn't even use the toilet. He had to go down the street to the gas station instead. He even almost failed gym because he couldn't be in the locker room with the other boys without a beating. He ended up dropping out midway through his senior year and leaving town. Edit, I should add, the local paper got wind of it and tried to do a story on discrimination and gay rights, but that only escalated the situation, which was the eventual cause of him leaving town. It's a good story but unfortunately never gained much popularity. My form tutor had a cane. Was really nice, everyone liked him. One day he apparently tripped over that cane in the middle of a lesson. He wasn't very hurt but the school still called his wife to inform her of what happened. It apparently went something like this. Hello, Mrs. ________. We just wanted to inform you that your husband has fallen over at work. Oh gosh, is he okay? Yes, he's fine. He just tripped over his cane. He doesn't have a cane. So yeah, my form tutor had a cane and was faking his disability. After this came out, some students claimed to have seen him actually running in the local park on Saturdays, and many people had noticed that sometimes he wouldn't actually put his cane on the ground. He would just move it back and forth but never actually make contact with the ground. Mormon jock white kids grabbed a Mexican girl's ass. At that time there was a gang called WBP Wetback Power, which was a rather large gang consisted of Mexican Americans or immigrant kids. What started as a huge brawl turned into a campus riot and students were throwing soda cans at teachers and destroying everything they could. Riot squad was called and whole block had to be closed off, shut down. This girl came to school embarrassingly drunk, staggering through the halls until a teacher tracked her down and carried her to the nurse's office. She was one of the conservative, quiet, mousy girls. That day she showed up hair teased to the max, skimpy blouse and the shortest skirt I've ever seen at the time. She was the topic of every conversation all day, and it was weeks before she resurfaced again, converting back to her quiet, mousy self. A few years after I graduated, 99, the assistant softball coach got caught having sex with one of the students/softball players. Then it came out that over the years he had had sex with over a dozen of the students/players. Dude was not conventionally attractive at all, and the girls he had sex with were all super popular. Super gorgeous. Turned out that the reason none of them came forward until he got caught was they all thought they were the only one, that they were special, and when they found out that they weren't special to him, they were pissed. Many of them were minors when they had sex, so he was charged, served time, and is now a registered S.O. His wife, who is gorgeous, divorced him. Two of his victims, they graduated in '98, were best friends during his crimes and were still friends when he got caught. One of our custodians had sex with a teacher. His wife, who was also a custodian, kicked him out of the house. A month later, one of the coaches unexpectedly went into a locker room after hours and discovered he'd been living at the school undetected. He was fired. Dude got caught bonking his twin sister. Kid brought a gun to my high school and fired it off in a classroom during lunch. We had an open campus and one of the teachers pulled the fire alarm thinking that would get the kids out faster. Unfortunately, we are supposed to go out to the field if the alarm goes off. That's the meeting spot. Only problem was that it was right underneath the third floor classroom this kid was in. So we all get outside and teachers are running across the yard yelling at us to keep going to the hospital next door, which is super random. Freeway had to get shut down because it ran right next to the classroom as well. The kid eventually let his 3 hostages go and fired at police in an attempt at police-assisted suicide. He got shot and ended up with brain damage but actually lived. A girl got pregnant and didn't tell anyone. Nobody noticed the whole time she was pregnant, and she finally gave birth in the school bathroom to a stillborn. She hid the body in her locker, and the body was found one day by the janitor, who noticed a weird smell coming from the locker. The poor soul ended up in an institution. Her dad was actually a good friend of my dad, and I remember how devastated he was for years after. A tragic story. I grew up in rural Oklahoma in the '80s. 2 of my teachers married, barely, former students. The biggest event I can remember in my day was that one of the 8th graders, I was a senior when this happened, it was a K-12 school, started dating a guy who graduated 5 years before I did. So she was 14 and he was 21 to 22. This was extremely common and the town was so poor that it was encouraged because he was seen as a contributing breadwinner, and all these girls were just going to become wives/mothers when they graduate. Anyway, 90% did. She took him home and he met her 28-year-old mother and he dropped the middle schooler like a hot brick. I was privy to all of this because 1, it was a very small town, and 2, my parents owned the local grocery store and everyone told their business there. So fast forward to the Halloween dance. The community was welcome, so there are adults there as well as high school kids. This was a dumb idea for obvious drug and alcohol reasons. Boyfriend shows up at the dance with 8th grader. I am DJing, my mixtape was a thing of beauty. Whitesnake into Skinner into George Strait, magic. Mama comes into the gym and grabs 8th grader by the hair and they roll around on the dance floor gouging and dropping G's and screaming their love for Richie. You get your goddamn hands off my man. And you don't even know how suck pecker yet. Type smack talk. Principal and coach drag them outside and half the crowd stays to dance to my Elton John Denver mix and the other half stands in the gym parking lot watching 2 attractive blondes fight over a man with a concave chest, pube mustache, and a part-time job sweeping and emptying trash at his uncle's laundromat. 84 students were arrested or apprehended for meth in one day. A girl, their dealer, gave cops the information of all of her customers, she kept records, and agreed to go to rehab instead of going to prison. Phys ed teacher, late 20s, was discovered to have a relationship with a senior, 18F, who also happened to be the daughter of the high school principal. Phys ed teacher's wife also worked at the school, and when it came out, she threw him out. He still needed his job, so he moves into a camper, which was parked at the school, and stays there the remaining 6 months or so. He then follows her to college, and gets a job in that town. I haven't heard anything in the last couple of years, but they were together last I heard. A guy got stabbed in the back. The attacker fled. He pulled the knife out of his back himself and then chased after his attacker like the freaking Hulk. A few years after I graduated, a kid took another kid into the woods at lunchtime and strangled him to death with his belt before returning to class. Oh, I have lots. The most memorable one was the student who set off a ton of cherry bombs in the bottom floor toilets to get the staff to come running to the scene, then setting off tear gas once they got there. No one knew why he did it. The band teacher's son, who was in my sophomore class, was murdered by a hunting rifle in a field while walking home from school. The murder went unsolved for 20 years. They think it was 2 older boys, but they both killed themselves in the 1990s. Really sad, especially because the murderer's younger brother was a good friend of the murdered kid. The younger brother was part of a group of friends that visited with the murdered boy's parents every Friday afternoon after he was killed. They did this for years, until they went away to college, etc. There was an illegal arms dealer in my school who was selling knives and tasers to kids. In 2000, a few years after I'd graduated, a local radio station ran an online contest that allowed people to vote for the school that would get a concert from Mandy Moore. Since this was back in the early days of the internet, they had no controls to track or limit voting. Kids from my school, an elite STEM magnet program, wrote a couple of scripts that generated tens of thousands of votes for our school. After seeing that, another school tried to do the same thing, but our bots were better. The station tried to say it would not count script votes and would disqualify anyone found using them. But it seems that the voting was so corrupted that there was no real way to figure what votes were real. We ultimately won the contest by a huge margin, and Mandy Moore came to perform. The real prize was winning the contest in the first place. No one showed up to the actual concert. HS girls basketball coach groomed and raped probably over 100 girls during his tenure. He was finally caught when a star potential D1 girl wound up preggo. No charges, just fired and retired. A guy and his friends went to McDonald's to hang out in the parking lot and he made what they all called a poop sock and then beat each other with it. Yes, he pooped in his sock. And also I think I should mention they were seniors. Our ICT teacher killed himself after his wife, who was a teaching assistant at our school, cheated on him. His son found him after he'd slit his wrists with a Stanley knife. He was a great teacher. The wife was not greeted well by the students and shortly resigned. Someone decided to smoke pot near some sort of vent and an entire wing of the school had to be shut down for it. Story that did happen back in the 80s. Cop came to my high school to talk to us kids about the dangers of drugs. With him he brought a locked briefcase with what the drugs looked like. A small sample of everything in blister packs. During his second day while on lunch with the case locked up in his squad car in the trunk, he returned to his squad car to find the trunk of the squad car pried and busted open, and drugs gone. He was supposed to come back for a third and final day, but never did. In 8th grade my friend and I got hot sauce banned from our school district because we decided to get 2 bottles of habanero sauce and chug them at lunch to prove our manliness, only to both leave school early and my friend go to get his stomach pumped in the hospital while I spent a week on the couch in pain with my parents informing me how stupid my life choices are. The weird kid in my school put his dead dog in his backpack.